Well, good evening, folks. This is the second meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And to start things off, I want to ask Anna to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming to participate. We have a pretty full agenda, and we have enough people here to make decisions, and hopefully we'll be joined by others. Just let me make a few opening remarks so that we have some guidelines to follow to keep our meeting in order. I will make it my business to make sure that every one of the members are called upon in some sort of order. For tonight's work, I'd like us to stay very focused in our remarks and limit our time to no more than 3 minutes, so it gives you an opportunity to be succinct and to the point. Also, no interruptions if one of the members is in the middle of her or his 3 minutes. Just be patient. If you have a comment to make, raise your hand, and I'm sure I'll recognize you since the room isn't that large. So the first item is on the agenda is process, and by this, what is meant is just how are we going to work in order to achieve the various recommendations that are contained within the master plan. That's what process in this context means. And the idea here is to, as I want to emphasize, is to get to the how. And in preparation for this, I did manage to make contact with a couple of towns and also looked at the documents, including the minutes, and talked to some of the members ex officio of some of the committees to understand how they're operating. The only one that I was not able to get a contact with yet, and I will, is the chairman, the at-large chairman for the Westford Town Implementation Committee, but I'm sure before the summer's over, we'll be in touch. However, I did get in touch with both Arlington and Milton's administrators and the folks who actually lead the implementation effort there, and along with Sturbridge, Walpole, and Lebanon, New Hampshire. So I got a sample all around, plus some others, to see what process they were following. And basically, it boils down to either, or a mixture of, project by project, or program by program that comes from the master plan. A number of towns, both according to conversation as well as in their websites, are advisory only. That is, they simply advise. And as far as I can make, their advice is exactly that. We advise you to do something. But they themselves do not formulate any particular plans, actions. They simply advise that, yes, you're on track or not. Arlington and Milton's are both program focused. And the comments that each made reflected more about the characteristics, personalities, and other factors that are about in the committee itself that may not pertain necessarily to us. We're going to be our own character, our own folks. But one thing I did come away from, and that is the importance of actually staying very, very attentive and focused on getting something actually accomplished. This is not merely planning for the sake of planning. So the plan, if we do have one, or a strategy to go forward, it has to be something that actually has a chance or has a characteristic of working. So it can't be, we will renovate the seashore or renovate the shoreline of Long Lake. It has to be specific. What do we mean by that? Who would do it? Who would take responsibility for overseeing it? What does it cost? Let me emphasize that. It has to have a strong action component. So with that as the background, what I would like to do is give you some models that are there, and you've had an opportunity to look at our master plan and all the recommendations that are there. So I'm interested in starting the discussion. Paul, would you like to start, since you're at the other end, about what you would like to see as our process? What would you think would work?
okay and trying to adhere to your admonition to keep it brief, I'll not take offense if you cut me off, but no, I think pretty straightforward. I think the approach you're taking is correct. I do think it's important to get a flavor from the full committee when all 7 are present of what their thoughts are, but for my part, I think as a process matter, taking a look at this document specifically, the recommendations, and trying to identify 2 categories of groups, those that are low-hanging fruit in that they're easy to achieve, and those that are very important, whether or not they're easy to achieve, and try to focus on them first and foremost. It'd be important in my mind in terms of a process so that we can get some traction by having some accomplishments on the easy stuff, and then not defer on the difficult stuff. And then on a parallel track, and I know that you've already thought of this, I think it's important to touch base and establish relationships with all the other committees that have responsibilities to this end, and tell them what we've identified, what our thoughts are, and if we have specific steps at that point, share them with them, invite their critique. If we don't, invite their input, and and work on implementation plans. But in terms of a process, I think you're fine-tuning the triage that exists in the master plan, and then touching base with other committees, and then getting about the business of determining what specifics are needed to make things happen, I think would be the priorities. And I think we need specifically to get out and do some visiting, some proselytizing out there amongst these committees so that things don't get forgotten. So I think the amount of times we show up at other committees' meetings is important.
Yep. Jonathan?
Well, I mean, I have to say I was overwhelmed when I started going through this, and the number of recommendations and, proposals. I mean, it's sort of hard to exactly figure how you even get a grasp of that. Maybe I should have taken more time and read it 3 times instead of what I did, but, so I think, how do you prioritize?
No, we're not picking the targets in this discussion.
No.
We are talking about
How to pick the
whatever
targets.
target we decide, whatever order we decide, whatever it is, how do we want to do it? Do we want to, I'm not repeating myself, you probably heard this, do we want to pick out, go program by program, I mean by that, and I hope I was clear, that we are going to basically select as a second step, after we know what our process is, but that would be it. If on the other hand, we're going to be advisory.
Oh, I
only,
see, that was I didn't realize that was
those were the 2 extreme options, where we basically nod our heads or not and track things and, admonish committees and all the rest, as opposed to being more proactive on a program-by-program basis. That's what that's the issue.
It's certainly, I mean, the immediate thing is to say, let's be more proactive and choose projects and work on them. But in some ways, given the number of projects that are listed here, and the fact that we have what do we have? 8-man?
7 now.
7 now, somebody?
Somebody decided not to be here.
Oh, okay, who was that? Can you?
Just keep going.
Oh,
We'll do that.
Okay, all right, sorry. Given the fact that we're that small a committee, I mean, I do think there's something to be said. I haven't really thought about it deeply enough, but since you raised this question, something to be said for sort of being a group that pushes other groups to do things. I don't know, is that?
Yeah, I mean.
Because I think, the groups, certainly lots of groups in town have their, what shall we say, have their expertise, have been working on issues for a long time, and maybe we would do best to maximize our input by sort of focusing on telling people, okay, so what are you going to do, and we're going to keep track of how you do it. I mean,
I see some real strong similarities between the two of you here. Anna?
So I think we have a lot that's already in the master plan that helps to guide us even in process. So for example, if as we have talked about, including all of the other committees and working with all the other committees, it can seem overwhelming. It really can, but at the same time, we do have some guidance in this. And then we are also working with the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen. So what I would envision, and I would draw this up on the board, but I don't think we have.
It must be around somewhere.
Somewhere.
Every now and then, somebody gets the urge. Myron, what do you think?
And if we don't have one, Maren, that's okay. But a couple of days ago, during the Board of Selectmen meeting, the goals for the 2017-18 year were established, and as such, those were followed in that meeting, and then we have the copy right here in front of us. And so the Board of Selectmen identified
Oh,
their goals, and I think that that's something that can be helpful to us to know that if they are working on one particular goal, perhaps it's something that our committee would also be working on and therefore can join forces. So let me give an example. Let's say that one of the things that we work on is the sewer. And so in looking at the chart from the Board of Selectmen meeting, it looks like that particular item under infrastructure needs is going to be championed by Chase Gerbig and Paul Glavy. So working with them on that particular item would be important. And then in our document of the master plan, on page, 175, item number, what number is it? Recommendation, number 8, recommendation number 8.
Yep.
Evaluate the recommendations from the upcoming Littleton Common Sewer Strategic Plan and determine next steps. Well, as part of that page, we have identified in our work local government partners, and local government partners are some of the other groups like the Finance Committee, Highways, the Town Administrator, and also the Economic Development Committee. So if we were to work on that particular item, we would be working with Chase and Paul from the Board of Selectmen, as well as working with some of the other committees listed here in order to coordinate with everybody and ensuring that we understand what everybody is doing. So that's how I see the process working.
So it's a program by program.
Yes.
And with the, what I'm
But if I
hearing in
could just
addition.
add in, since you raised that specific example, Anna, but it does speak to other items here on the list. If something has come up to be on the selectmen's list, greater the chances are that there's already a process underway, as is the case with the sewer. We've got the town engineer, DPW Director Chris Stott is involved. We have hired consultants. We have an existing subcommittee. You know, having the implementation committee weigh in and be a part of that is fine, but that's probably not the one that needs the boost as much as some other programs. That one's off the ground and going. Input is welcome, but it's happening.
No,
you know?
Right, but in
think
terms
we're-
of process,
Yeah.
being able to connect with the other committees and being
Right.
able to connect with the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board, because that's where we have,
How that fits in, say, for instance, with our other established goals or identified goals in the common area is probably the connective tissue and issue that is not specifically addressed in our sewer work. So I would say, you know, the analysis ought to be a little more fine to say, okay, in that case, they don't need to be told to go out and hire an engineer and do, already doing that. What they
Right.
need to be told is, don't do this in a vacuum, you know? We need to be mindful of doing it in in light of other things.
Paul, let me just say that it's heard, because the idea is not to be redundant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we just summarized that. We can't be redundant. I think that Anna was providing an example.
I understand that.
So, but I think the one that you mentioned about other aspects of the common revitalization would basically lend itself very well to basically enlisting all the relevant committees in town and persuading them or making it clear to them this is of such a high priority that they need to make a contribution. And I'm just reflecting on the fact, forgive me, that there are many committees in town, which I think is also mentioned in the Board of Selectmen's last meeting, there are many committees in towns that don't really do much of anything. And this is, I'm not picking on anyone, they just
No,
don't.
in fact, one of our goals, you were there, I mean, is,
Yeah.
and Cindy Napoli and I are sharing that thing, is to review our organizational structure. Committees sometimes get established, serve their, their useful lifetime, and then go on to exist, nobody pulls the plug on them, so. And then in other cases, there are overlapping duties where, a combined effort somewhere else is better. So we're gonna do that kind of analysis too.
Agreed. So what I suggest that we do at this point, since it looks like we're in agreement, that we wanted to go on a program-by-program basis. We're not going to be passive, we're not just, we wave our hands, we are going to, as it were, roll up our sleeves and try to get something started. So I think the next thing, which is much, much harder and requires a little bit more thought, would be the actual targets. And I think this might be a good time to start, and if we get more members in, I'd certainly like to get them to weigh in, but at least we can get off the ground and begin, not so much deliberating, but trying to identify those targets that fit the characteristics that you feel make the most sense. So there's the low-hanging fruit approach, and there is the, don't forget the difficult ones that could also be done in parallel. Let me just recommend that sometimes less is more, that we don't try to take on at first too many programs, and I don't want to give a number on it simply because I don't know what the committee in its infinite wisdom will end up deciding to do, but I would suggest clearly no more than 3 to bite off at the beginning, and it depends on what they are, what their demands are. And also, we should not be, hesitate for a moment when if we feel that additional expertise and help is needed, that we do so by going out of the immediate circle of committees and seek help from consultants. I think as one of our members, Gary, had suggested anyway. So if we're agreed that we're going to take a programmatic or a program-by-program approach, I'd be very interested to hear what we each feel might be initial target, shall we say, the first targets we'd undertake. And all of you have your own, as it were, after reading this. Remember, these should not necessarily be your personal pets, all right? These should be the things that you think would benefit the town to the greatest extent possible. So they may be your favorite things, but you may have to wait a while for that special, item that will only benefit 50 as opposed to something that may benefit 150 if we get started on it and do it right. I'm just making that as a recommendation. This doesn't mean what you want to do has no importance. It just means we're here to take care of the town, do the town a service, not just to satisfy our own personal requirements. And so if we're all agreed, let's begin the discussion after using the master plan as a beginning source. Remember, this is not hit in stone. We don't necessarily have to follow it to the letter, but I think it's a good place to start. Did you want to make a comment? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay. So I guess I'll just reverse engines and start with you, Anna.
Well, given that I was on the master plan steering committee, we spent a good deal of time working out the prioritization, if you will, of time, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, or maybe it was 4 to 6, and then 7 to 10 years. So every single one of the 67 recommendations has a time frame attached to it, as well as a priority level. And because of that, being able to look to those particular elements, I think is very important. We also took a great deal of time as a committee in identifying and presenting to the town that we had 3 that kind of rose to the top, and those 3 being revitalization of the common, sewer, and transportation. And so I think to the degree that we could focus on those, that would be a good way to spend our time. I'm sorry, zoning update, yeah, zoning update.
Yeah, this would be the fourth, right?
Well,
Sewer is considered
Sorry.
part of the common.
Sewer is
Yeah,
considered
but-
part of the common, right, so it was zoning.
Okay. Yours. And it could be the same. I mean,
If I had to choose, I mean, I think I would sort of go with what Ann just said. My only problem is I wasn't aware that I was gonna have to do this, and having 67, items in front of me, I mean, I wasn't aware that, I was gonna have to make this choice. I don't know whether,
We're not trying to get everything done tonight. I made the assumption that after reading the plan and going to the chart, that you had some idea of what direction the town would like to take. So I made the assumption, because that was part of your quote homework. Okay, so yes, we do take homework seriously. So, so the idea here is that if you at the moment aren't prepared to weigh in, that's very reasonable. And that's perfectly
I mean,
fine.
I tend to think that I'd kind of go along with a lot of what, I mean, basically the sort of things that Anna was saying. I mean, what is it? Common, transportation, and
Zoning.
zoning. Particularly if those are taken in the broad sense. I mean, the common, after all, has like 8 different items here and,
Yeah.
and others, so.
Right, we can get narrow. We can get narrow pretty quickly.
In the, interest of harmony, I'll second the recommendations to focus on those 3 main areas with the understanding, going through each of them, that the common area is critical for a number of reasons. One is the citizens repeatedly brought it up. 2, the sewer activity, which is central to it, is getting off the ground and happening anyway. And 3, a lot of other activity on the ground, just driven by private property owners, is happening. So the quicker we get engaged there and inject all the considerations, the open space, the traffic calming, the infrastructure repairs, the aesthetics, the retail businesses that aren't there that we want there, the parking issues, all of that, make sure that that's all in a common conversation, I think is nothing more important we could do. Secondly, a lot of things do come back to zoning and regulatory policy, but when we say that, and I don't really know that it's been reflected a whole lot here, there's a lot of places, and the planning board has ongoing activity on this, whether it's housing, as is going on upstairs tonight, right? Or is that a housing discussion, or?
No, that's not.
No,
a
all right,
discussion,
Well, all right, well, there was
But that's
something
coming up.
crossed my desk today on that, but, figuring out what pieces of that, is it tinkering with existing bylaws such as the overlay district, is it extending some of those, is it, proactive housing policies such as those that were entertained at the annual town meeting, or other things? We gotta, kind of bore down on what do we mean by that.
Yeah.
So that's the second. And the third thing, the transportation piece, that is, it's amorphous enough that if you don't consider it at that level, then we lose track of how important it is to tie different pieces of the town together. If we are making progress in that, then I'd let my own pet trio sit. But I think, and I discussed this when we were adopting the goals, I think a second retail corridor, which was identified in the previous master plan and didn't get quite as much attention in this one, is critical, especially where it would logically go on the Taylor Street, Foster Street part of town near the train station, especially where a lot of those buildings, which 20 years ago were starting to go empty, have remained empty and now have become obsolete. There's a lot of need to give special attention to that part of town, number one. Number 2 is the farm corridor and conducting delicate discussions with the farmers who very properly get their hackles up when you try to tell them what to do with their business. But, it's so important to the town's image of itself and amongst other things, economically and otherwise, and yet it survives essentially on their own individual efforts. There's not much we're doing to help them, and a lot of ideas that people come up with to help them are not always received all that well. So nonetheless, the common consensus is we should be doing something about that. The third one I'd throw in there is the master plan doesn't talk about Littleton a lot in terms of being a collection of neighborhoods. And I think that was kind of an oversight, and it's somewhere at the end of the process. If we've made progress here, I'd like to try to revisit that, so that,
Oh, it's, yeah.
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 So anyway, those, you wanted priorities, those are my priorities.
I'd like to pick up on something to test not test, but to have the committee, that you mentioned Taylor and Foster Street.
Yeah.
And as being a potential, in your mind, a potential second sort of residential commercial center, not to preclude the common itself, or what we call the common. This doesn't mean we do one and not the other.
No.
But of those two locations, in
The
terms.
needs are different, too,
Huh?
yeah.
They're very different, but in terms of those locations, to begin our process, which of them, at least from the inventory point of view and from our own knowledge of the town, you folks sitting here probably know more about it than you care, you probably just assume everybody knows, we may not know. Would you start there? Would you say that's one of the prime areas that we should undertake?
If I wasn't clear on it, I agreed with the suggestion that the three original identified areas ought to be the three areas for their own reasons. I just went on to add three others,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And I tend to agree with Paul. I mean, I think that the common is clearly, people see it as central. I mean, it's a problem, of course, in sort of develop. I mean, I think it is a good idea to think about how you might develop that Taylor Street area.
Here's,
But a lot of people don't even know it's there or something.
We could wait 6 months on that if that was 6 months spent on the common.
okay.
So it sounds like what we're saying with the three initial identified through the steering committee and the additional three that you brought up about Taylor Foster Farms collection of neighborhoods, we're talking about six. One of the things that,
Excuse me, we're talking about?
about six of them. And so I'm wondering if we should talk about our time frame right now. Are we talking about what are we going to get started on in the next fiscal year? Are we talking about that 1 to 3 year timeframe? What's your sense of it?
I'd say be bold. If we had a couple of meetings in July, August, we could identify those things from our list of 67 or whatever it is that are so easy, especially ones that also match up into that, so easy to implement, that we could have a list of recommendations for the fall town meeting, for starters. And then, boom, you would go from one town meeting accepting it to the next one actually doing some of it. I don't expect any of the major pieces would be ready to do anything on that, but we could pluck out some of the easy stuff while working on the longer-term plans.
Okay, so if we're working on the longer-term plans, but at the same time, we want to pluck out, quote, the easy, what do you see as easy?
I think it requires going through the list. I don't know.
Okay.
At some point, we're gonna have to sit down with everybody and go step by step through the whole list.
Okay, so I'd like to get our other members launched, even if they're not here. I'd like to be able to send them their homework, as it were. So would it be fair to say that our next meeting, at least when it comes to picking, we should identify what we each see as the, shall we say, the easy lower hanging fruit, using this as the guide, and at the same time revisit the priority ones that may be more difficult?
Sure.
And just have everyone, as it were, come back fully prepared to really dig into that. Okay.
I think that sounds good, Mike.
Okay, I think we may have crossed the Rubicon here a little bit. But we got to stay targeted and make sure we can communicate to everyone, including those who are not here, that these are the ones they should focus on, the prime ones, the big ones, and the low-hanging fruit they can try to pick up themselves, and some of them may be within these larger topics.
No, 3 of the 7 members aren't here, so they may well, have different ideas.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's why I'm going to enlist them, but, until they show up and do it, it's hard to read it. Okay, if that's the case, I'm going to move on to B, the public engagement activity. What this was is something I'd like to just sort of make sure that all of us practice or understand, that to be to be aware of the fact that you now represent the implementation committee, and by definition, a broader spectrum of town than a committee that's just devoted to one or two items. So it's not that I want you to give up your favorite items or favorite things in town. You don't have to give up on the library, the historical society, or the sewage system, or whatever. But
Can I interject here?
Sure.
The Historical Commission?
this historical commission, okay.
A
You may
common,
be- you
a
may start
common
out-
confusion.
No, it's okay. Historical commission, I thank you very much for the correction.
Both are represented
Both
tonight.
are represented here, Carolyn
I'm
is.
glad you're keeping things honest here. Just keep in mind that, don't give up your interest and obviously your advocacy, but definitely keep in mind that,
Oh, yeah.
you do represent a slightly, considerably broader, how does the question will arise here sooner than you might think. We're going to look to the Historic Commission to assist us quite vigorously, and the question is how. But there's already some ideas floating up. So since both of you are here, I invite you to start thinking about it now, and not just in terms of identification of what might be, but how that identification can help the town in other
Yeah.
spheres. Because it turns out the history of a town can really help and guide its growth and development. So it retains and enhances its character. So it's not trivial, let's put it that way. So I'm just letting you know it's coming. Okay, the budget.
The budget, so, handout here.
Is there anything specific more you wanted to say on B, use of various media and so on? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to, I'm sorry, I was going to, actually, this is more for Maren at this point. There is in existence a website and a Facebook page at the very least. And it's not that I don't want to let those go. But the question in my mind is, who can, who can keep them up to date, administer those things?
The master plan website, the Plan Littleton,
Yeah.
that Eric put together, is static at the moment. When we get the new town website, we'll pour all that information over to the town website, and at that point, we'll be able to update and play with it. But we do have the ability to do a master plan implementation committee web page, and we can fill in whatever information we want
Okay.
on that, so.
I just want to keep that going, and also now Facebook. Who's been doing, I mean, I thought one of the previous members were doing Facebook.
Melissa was involved.
Yeah.
Right, is there, I mean, we only have 7 members, I'm not sure who has Facebook skills. Well, we better figure that one out.
Yep.
But before I say, do all of us agree, and I'm looking for input here from everyone, is the Facebook activity worthy for us, the implementation committee? I mean, I have my own view that it is. If it is, that's great, but we don't necessarily have to add to our burden if people feel that it's inconsequential.
I think as long as we can have access to it, it's something that we can update, and I can do that.
Oh, okay.
We probably won't have the same needs for it that we did in the prior iteration, for soliciting as much input from the community. It's probably more of a making people aware of what's
Right.
going on type
Another
thing.
way for meeting announcements
Right.
and/or when any kind of update.
Yeah, I had in mind two-way, because
Yeah.
both of these are two-way, so I really think Facebook is great, so you can get people to, if they pay attention, can actually arrive on the Facebook page and respond to what is on there, and I think that's probably to our advantage as well, regardless of the risks, as it were, to go along with that. But I think it's worthwhile keeping it in play. Thank you for the reminder.
And actually, the master plan web email address is still active.
Okay. So the only thing we might want to do is, make a new email address for the implementation committee to keep it distinct? Or does that make things more confusing? I'd like to have some from input here. I mean, I'm.
Well,
What
the,
was the
the
address?
the address, masterplan@littletonma.org.
Oh, then that makes sense,
So-
just keep it.
Keep it, I would say keep it.
Okay, all right. Okay. Back to the budget. Just to review, our budget at the moment is, available to us is a total of theoretically $55,000, of which 20,000 is from a prior town meeting appropriation, and there's still $35,000 implementation from an article in the ATM article from the,
Most recent.
we had it. So it's a total of $55,000 that we have. What I would like to suggest is that we, A, agree to put aside or to advance or to specify $19,600 of that for, I'll call it administration and coordination of our activities. And that isn't going to be a budget item. We'd have to agree that that 19.6 would be dedicated to that. Then in a separate motion, it is proposed that Maren plus an unnamed, I guess, administrative assistant.
Who's gonna be doing the hiring? You guys gonna take the lead on that, or what's anticipated?
We have to vote on both the allocation of the funds, and we're left here with the privilege of basically selecting the hire. So those are the two things that are here, and the only candidate at the moment who stepped forward for this activity has been, or that's been made available so far for us is Maren.
Yeah, but it's anticipating there'll be someone else helping you too, right? Or not?
Actually, for that, I can draw from the on-call administrative assistants that the town has already found.
As long as that works.
Oh, I see, okay.
So basically, I want to make sure that I'll put together a letter, or have a letter, once we get Maren on board, we'll put together a letter that says that we are going to be using the funds as described here.
Okay, so that's the 19,006?
Yes, and also we're going to basically make sure that we have available to us the remainder, the 35 is the beginning to support activities going forward, which we will hopefully define in the next, shall we say, several meetings.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to need more than the 35, I'm sure, to move ahead, but I'd like to make sure that stays within our scope. So there's two motions here. One is for the total, and the other is for, actually three, for the total, and then the second is for the 19.6 to be devoted to administrative support,
That's through the end of the fiscal year.
fiscal year, correct.
That is,
Well,
next fiscal.
I'm gonna make I'll make the motion just to approve the budget as proposed, inclusive of both of them. I don't know that it needs to be two motions.
Second.
I've heard a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So be it. That ends the discussion.
So, Mike, you see the 30, there's like $35,000 left after we've spent the, more or less
Well,
20?
it's basically, I want to make sure that you understand that our budget has already built into it that we're anticipating spending 19.6 on administrative help going forward. That's targeted.
Okay,
The remainder we have, but it has no target yet.
okay.
But
Do you have any sense of what what it's likely to be, or?
it could be one of two things. Either, probably more than likely, it's going to be some sort of expert consultant.
Oh,
That's my best guess, maybe more than one.
oh,
God, I was counting on frivolous spending.
I'm afraid there will be no parties.
Ah,
But I think that really begs the question that if we can identify what it is that the committee is going to be focusing on for the next year, that we are able to then determine if 35,000 will cover whatever it is that we're
If it
planning on
doesn't,
doing.
well-
And if not, we are under a deadline to make sure that we get that next,
Could be transfers of funds at the fall, there
Out of
could be money
dollars,
put into
exactly.
the annual for the next spring, and there could be
Exactly.
reserve fund transfers if it's of an emergency basis, but
Right.
there's ways to get money.
right, so there is a process that we need to follow, and
Yeah.
timelines are coming soon, so we don't want to miss that. Yeah.
Okay. It's time for public input. Anyone have anything to put in? All right, well, in view of the fact that we have quite an ambitious set of tasks for us for our next several meetings, and as I think Anna's pointed out, we need to move on this rather rapidly, but carefully. And we don't have to do the whole, cover all the whole chart in one group, in one sweep. It'd probably be a good idea if in the course of doing homework, you break it down into pieces, doable, active pieces. Keeping in mind that if you do propose any sort of, quote, planning, that it's going to have a price tag associated with it, and it has to be, we have to work it so that we can make that price, the costing out of it visible. That means it could be put out for bid. So it can't be slogans and it can't be wishful thinking. It's got to be pretty specific. It's how we get down to it.
Right, and once there are targets or projects that are highlighted, then town administrator's office and I can start looking for grants that might be available too.
Right, and I was actually going to work it the other way too, and that is that I can't believe we're the only town in all of Massachusetts still doing master plan implementation. I know we're not. I was just wondering if you also could, be aware of those organizations that have funds available, what they have funds for. We could feed that into this group, our group, so we can, as it were, more efficiently respond and see if any of them really fit. And that would, it could very well be that it could be the range may be wider than we think. It could be anything from transportation to infrastructure that has become a desire of the town. And that is not labeled implementation, it's an infrastructure component. So I'm going to ask you and Anthony if you can bring it up on your database system to see what's there and to let us know through Maren, to Anna and me, or whatever works best for you to.
you know, can you look at the Mass Historical Commission? They have funds for planning, they have planning grants that come out every year. I just saw something about that.
And I'm just going to give an example, since you opened the door. I'm just going to, the example is that there are instances where towns identify an area as being a historical district, I'll call it, and it's based on real history. That is, something happened there of note, of value, that needs to be brought out, enhanced, identified. So if there is something going on, if there is something about the Common or about Foster Street, or about any part of town where it's rich in history, that's just sort of lying there fallow, that no one's ever, who cares? I think it's time to revive it and ask ourselves, is this a basis for making something really nice in the town that fits what we want to do? I mean, I'm hoping it's the Common, but so far the stories I've heard about the Common, that little piece of green, is that cattle were there,
Paul had a story about that.
right? But
Were you present at one of my tales?
yeah, but believe it or not,
Great
there were
uncle
people here
participated
before
in one of
Paul
the
was here.
Yes.
There were people here before Paul
Yes,
was.
I'm
I want to go back to that history. all right? Maybe his ancestors.
Within the lifetime of people I knew, a cattle drive annually used to start at the Common, and it took all the cows up to where they were from Littleton, that they would go and stay the summer, which was around the foothills of Mount Monadnock. You knew that, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. If we can turn that into a grant for the common, okay? Let's go for it, but I don't want to preclude it. I mean, all right, it's just,
An
go
annual
for it.
cattle drive.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. So we want to work on, probably the most difficult thing tonight is going to be working on the schedule. So, do we want to switch, do we want to go to Tuesday evenings? Or what would work? I mean, we got to have a standard here that we can sort of stay on.
That's as good as anything. I mean,
Tuesdays are
you're
good?
dealing with 7 people, all of whom have,
They
well, most of whom have some other commitments, but, whatever.
Are there any other standard town meetings that take place on Tuesdays?
Tuesdays are pretty,
Health and-
Board of Health, yeah.
Okay, you want to do for Tuesdays? Okay, okay. Tuesdays at 6:30 or 7, we can be that flexible? Are we
I
okay?
love the earliest starts, that's fine with me.
like the
either way.
6:30?
Yeah, just personally.
You can have an early dinner.
I like 7,
You like 7?
yes.
Defer to Jonathan, that's fine.
Especially over the summer, because
Oh, no, wait, hold a minute. All right, so over the summer, all right, and,
I go swimming.
Ah,
I'm flexible, so
all right.
If
either one.
I could make 6:30 if other people really wanted.
Well, we don't have enough here to, dragoon them, so, Paul, are you willing to stick with 7 until
Oh,
we?
sure.
And if we want to switch back to 6:30 when it won't be a hardship on, okay, all right. Make it so, Captain, make it so, okay. All right, are there any corrections for the minutes of the last?
So are we saying this every Tuesday?
I just want to get the time first,
Oh.
okay? And I want to, the reason I'm moving to the minutes is I want to make sure that everything in there is okay. I'll come back to our next meeting, because that will,
Oh,
The only thing that I noticed in the minutes was Paul's name on the second or third page was cut off, P-A.
oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that. You'd think I'd know that. You'd think I'd know
And my
that.
last name on the first page was not spelled correct, but that's it. They were impeccable, Maureen.
Yeah, minutes were very good.
okay. All right.
I'll move approval with those noted corrections.
And did you hear a second?
Second.
I second.
Or the motion to accept the minutes as printed and corrected? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Now let's go back to the meeting schedule, item E. Now that we know that we've got our minutes in place, it's safe to do so. Our next meeting, I want to use you as a barometer, Jonathan, because I have no idea your schedule. When do you think you would be ready to respond, given the homework and all the rest, in an effective way? Another 2 weeks?
Certainly in 2 weeks. I mean, I could come in I could be ready in 1 week, I think. Oh, no, 1 week, of course, is no good,
Next week.
because 1 week is the 4th of July.
That's why I opened the door.
Yeah, I'll 2 weeks is fine for the
2
next
weeks.
meeting, and I would suggest that we not schedule more than 2 meetings a month for us, because if we're true to what we were talking about earlier, some of our time should be spent going to other boards' meetings, out doing the,
Yes,
yeah, so.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if we scheduled something for the 11th and the 25th, so that's 2 in July, and then the following 2 weeks would be August 8th, and that would fit well, I think, with when the planning board, if there's any additional dollars that we're requesting, would meet. Is that correct, from a timing perspective?
When the Board of Selectmen.
I'm sorry, Board of
we need that
Selectmen.
information to add it to the fall town meeting warrant.
So that would be timely enough?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that gives us 3 meetings to make decisions on those.
I wouldn't be able to make the August meeting, but that's okay, because I mean, you can't fit me in there because I'm gonna be out of the country for a couple of weeks, so.
Okay. Good to know.
So, you know, the only thing we're going to have to do is establish a system to dun our members to make sure they show up.
I'll let them know you voted a fine.
That will get them, I think, operational. Gary will surely, he will like that one. Okay, so I guess we were all set with item F. Is there any other business?
Say that again, so July 11th, July 25th, and August something, which I can't think of.
And you'll send it all out anyway.
Yeah, well, you'll get
Okay.
it very quickly.
If I can just say, Mr. Chairman, you're gonna do this anyways, but I'm gonna underscore, especially as, having been on a million committees, a new committee, until people get used to it, you know, we're gonna have attendance issues until it becomes their norm. A new committee that starts in the summer is worse yet, and a new committee that starts in the summer where everybody else is there because they have other interests, you know, it just makes those conflicts, you know, more likely. So the more work you do to beat people over the heads to show up and do their homework, the better off we all will be.
Yeah, I definitely will,
I know you're up to it.
yeah, in addition to the formal dunning, there will be the informal dunning and withholding of refreshments. Okay, I will visit the pub on the common and identify the characters, the miscreants.
Tell them they can't be served.
That's
unless they
correct,
show
yeah,
up
that's
or
my
what.
idea. Okay,
Plays hardball.
that's it, that's it. So on that happy note, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Would you please turn off the TV?